What's up?
How's it going?
Wanted to open this up real quick. So, we're like, I don't know, a couple days late on this stream, first and foremost. Like to apologize, but we'll get through it. We have a couple points that we are definitely going to hit today. We have a nice little meta discussion and the nice little finance discussion planned out. We have some questions from the Discord, along with whatever questions we may get during the stream. The one thing that I have not done, not that I'm really overly concerned about it, but I'm going to share this right here real quick. Send it. There we go. That is where it is. So, pretty eventful week. I guess realistically, there was, we haven't been together since PPG Denver. A lot to take away from that. This week is the first down week, I would say. So rather than searching the interwebs for information on some tournament, there just isn't one this weekend.
Sure.
That I've been able to find it at least. Maybe something will pop up. I don't know. But next weekend, there's another 1K for PPG at their store in Miami. So we'll have some details to at least talk about that next week, which will be fun. But what about just as we're kind of like getting into it, Scott? Like, what about the financial world this week? Was anything crazy, drastic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what like just like a summary of it of like the week?
I mean, we're only a week, so because of the way the big box release was a debacle, not everything like hit the stores on September 1st.
Right.
So you still had you either had a first wave or what seemed like a small second wave of product being put out at certain stores. So it's not like everything was out there on the first, like you walked in the store on September 1st and everything was there. So you still had some stores putting out their either original inventory or secondary inventory this week. So you still had a bunch of driving around trying to find product. You had certain stores like GameStop releasing in very limited stores and very limited quantities.
Mm-hmm.
As of recording now, we're recording on the 9th. So as of yesterday,
yeah,
you had Best Buy definitely on the West Coast, I heard, holding their pre-orders up a week. So some people were getting their stuff yesterday as well, available for pickup. And I assume, I didn't see from anybody, I continue to assume that there's none actually in the stores. Any that I've gone to, there's nothing there.
The one Best Buy I walked in had like barcodes for it,
but no,
but no, yeah, nothing. And all the Best Buys that I like, granted, my area, I don't know, Best Buy, I don't know about your area. My area only has like 3 Best Buys in like a 20-mile radius of each other. So it's like totally a half hour between any Best Buy. Like, so if I wanted to go to every Best Buy in the area in a day, it would be like over 2 hours of driving, I think. But every one that I only went into 2, be completely honest. I walked into 2 Best Buys. Neither of them had any product on the shelves. Everything that I spoke to was told that it was from pre-order product that just got either shipped to the store for pickup or shipped directly to the person that purchased it. But I didn't see anything in a Best Buy.
Yeah. When I was there on the 1st, picking up my pre-order from early August, they said, the one in Christiana Mall in Delaware has some gift sets. I'm like, well, that's 45 minutes each way. Now, in fairness, the hour and a half I spent driving around to every other big box store that day resulted in nothing either.
Right.
So
right. Hey,
actually driving.
There was those 2 packs from Barnes & Noble, okay?
6 packs total from Barnes & Noble. My bad. From 2 Barnes & Noble, my bad.
What I think was interesting, in all honesty, is that instead of it being like a September 1st release, it was more like a August 28th for Walmart, August 30th for Target, Best Buy and Barnes & Noble on the 1st, and then like GameStop's like the 8th. I heard Hot Topic also had it on the 8th. I did not go to another Hot Topic, so I would have no idea to prove that.
Good point.
But instead of it being like this mass market release on September 1st, it was more like scatter release for whatever random vendor decided to put it out that day.
whatever random vendor decided to put it out that day on their route.
Right.
So, and I'm going to talk about this in a more in-depth video, but like,
Yeah.
for example, if say your vendor stocks your Target on Wednesdays, right? Let's just put it out there, right? But Ravensburger didn't get the product to the Target, and I'm making this up, like on Thursday, he wouldn't have restocked. He or she wouldn't have restocked
until next Wednesday. Right.
So technically, the release at that specific store would have been whatever, like the 6th. That's what I mean. Like driving around this week was just as advantageous as driving around last week.
Yeah,
depending on the store too.
It might even be that it might be that true for weeks to come.
Right.
And also, like, there's really no pattern, honestly, to any of it.
Right.
So since there's no actual pattern, then like basically, if it's not out of your way and you're still really hungry for a product, then stopping at a Target on the way home from work, or hey, my kid needs cookies, like whatever, just make an excuse to go to Walmart or to Target, and you never know what you might find. I think the Barnes & Noble stuff might be a little bit less sporadic, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems really difficult. Like at the end of the day, it was not advertised as intended at all, right? Like now, granted, I heard this really interesting thing that I didn't really grasp in the moment, right? Like that whole week. But the crazy thing is that Ravensburger said that they were going to support the local stores more than the big box stores.
Sure.
All of those numbers actually provide that, right? I mean, if most stores got 24-ish boxes and some other product, then like that's more than your Walmart's getting. That's more than your Target's getting. Like that's more than all those things. So like, although the print run for for it obviously is small, way smaller than we could ever hope for demand, right? But it is a factual thing now that although local game stores were pissed and they were upset because all they got was X, it's like they still got more than the big box stores.
Yeah, the only caveat to that is the other day at lunch, I went to 3 Targets in less than an hour. I can't go to 3 game stores in less than an hour. So overall, I think if you put it like on an individual store basis, I totally agree.
But if we just said Target X and Target Y were
game stores, yes, versus a game store, yes, totally
versus a game store, then the game store got like 10 times their product.
Sure, yeah, totally agree.
And that's like, I guess that's, I'm not saying it's fair to look at it that way, but if in your area, if you just said, okay, all of my Targets and Walmarts, I'll just count as game stores. Sure. They got way less product than your game store.
Yeah. And they have a much bigger customer base as well.
Right. Gigantic customer base for sure. Right. So it's the point now where I don't know that like everybody knows what Lorcana is, right? Like I won't go to that extent.
Sure.
But other gamers, right? Like other card gamers that have no care whatsoever about Lorcana, well, they care about, like they've heard about this. They know this phenomenon. They understand it. So now that they understand that, if they walk into a Target and they see product, they're just going to buy it because they know they can just see on Facebook that they can flip it for literally double what they're paying for it, in all honesty.
More than that, but yeah.
Sure.
I'll take it a step further. I had personally multiple sports card dealers reach out to me over the past 2 weeks and ask me about if I could provide them product. Wow. And they don't usually even deal in games.
Yeah.
So the card industry itself is aware of it as well.
Yeah. Which is crazy because it's a little wacky, but we do have a complete video coming out talking all about this. Scott has it all planned out and worked. So be on the lookout for that this week on the channel, of course. If you're enjoying the content so far, welcome to the channel. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. Our games got 12 boxes and still have 10 because they're charging $350 box. It's a lot. It sucks. But in all honesty, like in my educated decision there is that box is worth $350. I'm just saying. I could show you the numbers. We could run everything, but I promise you that if you really wanted that box, it's worth that. Unfortunately, I can't even fault them for it. And not to mention, finding boxes now is like almost like finding a unicorn. It's pretty close. It's not exactly that, but it's getting close to that. And I think it'll only get worse the further we get into October, right? I mean, Scott and I, our store that we were able to order stuff from like weeks ago, like for release weekend, they just released a second wave, but you're only allowed to order one box, and we had to pre-order it and prepay for it, and we're not going to get that box for like another month. So like that's how far in advance that we had to pre-order just to get a single box. So
and they actually charged us ahead of time this time. Last time,
right. Last
of.
time it was just
Yeah.
basically charged day of release. This time it was the opposite. It was we had to pay to secure of even getting the box in a, like I think it's October 6th, so we're just under a month to when we actually can even get that product. But we're going to talk meta to start the stream. I know we were having a little interesting conversation about the financial side, which we'll touch back on the second half of the stream. In the first half, the plan of the day is we're going to break down the top 8 decks from PPG Denver and discuss, you know, why they succeeded in a given event, and then how we would kind of adapt and change them moving forward as the meta continues to evolve. This week, we're not going to get a ton of information aside from like weekly league plays. There's no other 1K event to really break down and analyze. So this is just what we're, you know, spending our resources on this week of going, okay, these were the decks. This is why they succeeded. This is why I think that they may succeed or fail. And we'll kind of just go through it. So first and foremost, Scott, our top 8 decks were, I cut Scott out. I'm such a meanie. Our top 8 decks were 2 Ruby Amethyst, 2 Steel Amethyst, 1 Amber Emerald, 1 Amber Amethyst, 1 Emerald Amethyst, and 1 Amber Steel. There's a really nice theme of this, and it's Amber and Amethyst.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. This is what I've been saying for a while now. So
now you helped call the stream, right? I think you ended up doing 5 of the rounds, I believe.
Yeah, sounds right.
We saw all of these decks. Actually, we didn't see all of them. I believe we never saw Hung Lee on stream, but everyone else, I think the other 7 we saw at least on stream one time. Was there anything about the decks during the event that you were shocked by?
Some of the card choices here and there, but in general, I mean, within their archetype, not really.
Right.
But some of the individual card choices were interesting and positive, mostly.
Okay.
I wouldn't say there was anything that like. I mean, the only other things that stood out to me was just some of the numbers of cards in the decks and the numbers of the individual cards as opposed and the size of the, I guess you would call it like the deck size or something like that in general.
Right. We're gonna specifically touch on the Ruby Amethyst decks at a point here. Yeah. But to start, let's break into one of our top 8 decks, and that was the PPG Amber Amethyst. It was played by Sam Cahill. This was an Amber Amethyst list. It pretty much is just like a control list here, right? But there's some interesting choices for this being a control list. For me, the first card that stands out in a big way is Pascal. What do you think Pascal is here for?
Probably just chipping away at lore, like just getting ahead of your opponent in terms of lore. I don't really know what you would classify this deck as.
Yeah.
I think that it's
just a value deck, right? Like it just has a lot of ways to gain value. So like most of the time for me with value, I just put that in like the mid-range class or tempo, whatever you want to call it. That's what I would label it as.
Yeah, like I think this deck could be improved to have more synergy in it the way it is now.
Mm-hmm.
There are some cards I definitely like. You probably saw this more than me. Like, I don't really know how good You Have Forgotten Me is when you're playing like mid-range as opposed to aggro. I can understand why it's really good in aggro, because if you can deny your opponent the ability to come back from turn 4 and 5,
right?
And you already have a huge board established. I can understand that. But like I get part of your world, but like if you're gonna play this color combination, like. Where's Arrow?
So, yeah, listen, and here's something that I think needs to be said before we really get into this. I say this all the time, and a lot of the tips videos for new players and things like that. Like I always say, like you have to learn from losses. You got to learn from things. But honestly, once we get to a point and we look at this as a success rate, right?
Yeah.
Once we're in top 8s, okay. The goal, I've said this last week on stream, the goal for any of it, in my opinion, is to get a top 8 in whatever event you're playing in. If you get top 8, you've had a successful day. anything plus that is just bonus.
Yep.
But when we talk about trying to be in like that winner's mindset, then you need to be able to really evaluate your wins. And this is one of those decks where, like, when I honestly look at it, I understand everything here. I actually respect a lot of the decisions made in this deck, like in a big way. But then there are question marks of like, well, why do we have this? Why do we have so many of that? And how do I craft this to just become a better deck as a whole? Now, Amber Amethyst, right? Scott will agree with me here. Amber Amethyst has the most draw power, period, right? Like, if every in combination, you cannot get more draw power out of another in combination. So because of that, why are there so many 4-ofs? Right. Why is there not more choice? Why is there not more creative like answers and tools to go with you? Like, I can make an argument why you don't play Spectacular Singer in this list, and it's just because you, quote, don't need it. But I can also say I can also say that, like, it's Maleficent 6 or 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? So like now I just have the greatest 3-cost characters ever. Like, instead of playing Mickey Mouse, if you just played Ariel, I think right there your deck is already better. Like, literally just, and maybe it is a card collection thing, and we don't know, right? I don't know if he just didn't have them. I have no idea. But if I'm looking to improve, one of the first choices I would make is absolutely A, trimming down on a lot of these numbers, B, with that trim, adding in more of silver bullet options, and then C, the last and final thing is just playing better cards. So for me, when I look at this, Mickey Mouse, I just can't fathom ever playing that card over Ariel, like, period. And even right now, we don't have Be Our Guest in here, right? So we only have 7 songs. Fine. We can make room, I promise.
We can play Be Our Guest, and then you can cut down the numbers, like you said. That's
right. And that's another thing, is once you play a card like Be Our Guest, you can also further cut down the numbers. So, like, I don't think this is a deck that I'm going to play Pascal in. I was very interested in the choice of Stitch, and my honest thought on Stitch at now, and this happens actually a couple times in this top 8 decks as we're breaking them down. But the Stitch, do you think people are playing Stitch, Scott, just to threaten Rockstar?
I guess if you're going to play a 1-drop without it, I think that's a good choice.
Right.
But so I would be playing Rockstar in this deck also.
No, sure, 100%. But my point is that this happens a couple times in these top 8 decks where, like, they just have Stitch, new dog, but then they don't have Rockstar. I'm just like, man, like, not even one? Like, are we just, like, so interested in the threat of what this card represents that, like I hope my opponent burns the fire the cannons on it? Like, is that where I'm at? Because I'm okay with playing that game for what it's worth. Like, I'm totally okay with this mind game that you're playing within a match. But it is interesting to me. That's all.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I think the Pascals and Mickey Mouses, and honestly, even the Dr. Facilier, I think that those 12 cards right there would open up a bunch of options here, a ton. And then even looking at it going like, man, do I really need 4 Baby Elsa? Do I need 4 You Forgotten Me? Do I need 4 Rafiki? Do I need 4 Jafar, right? Like, all of those numbers can be played with. So, like, I think you could honestly change about 20 cards in this deck and still keep the overall core and concept of it.
I agree. I think Pascal is in there because what it allows you to do is, like, on turn, I guess it's turn 8, you can play Pascal and Surfer Stitch with only one other character in play, and then you can use Surfer Stitch's ability. Or he can be a character that sits in play is harder to deal with. And so I think he allows you to get better surfers, if that makes sense.
Right. That's fair.
So
that's fair. Okay. Let's get into the next one.
Sure.
So our next deck is top 8, Joseph Trueblood, and he is representing the Amber. I had to throw my watch just kept going off, guys. It was pissing me off. He's playing the Amber Emerald Aggro.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? I mean, that's what this looks like he's trying to do here.
Yeah, mid-range. I mean, it has some. It's a higher. I guess it's. Yeah, I would still call it aggro because it has a couple higher drops.
Yeah. it actually, I mean, like the problem is it has more 4 costs. It has just as many 4 costs as above as it does 3 costs or below.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's why I actually think this is closer to a mid range in a way.
It's fair.
But just because I need to get it right, I need to understand this, and this is just from my point of view. When my opponent plays just in time on turn 3, and they play like any 5 cost card, I always feel behind.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're playing Emerald and you have the best 5 cost cards in the game, arguably, characters, I should say, arguably, I don't understand the world where we're not playing just in time. I really don't. I just think I don't. There was a now. Granted, listen, you can go back, right? Like you can go back on this channel. You can find videos of Scott and I saying that we did not like just in time because it was a net negative in card. All those things. The moment you play it, the moment you play against it, the power is just above and beyond. And it really and the sick thing. This is the real sick thing for me is that not only is it good on turn 3, but it's also good on turn 7. Like it's also good on turn 5. Like as long as you can weigh the resources to always be up in curve, then that card is just always threatening power.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I don't understand why these decks aren't playing that card. I don't get it.
I think it's the combo element of it. People don't like, probably, I would assume. Yeah, that to me is probably the biggest reason. I mean, I would try to fit them in, even if you only play like as a 3 of, but I would probably still play it as a 4 of. If you're gonna have, I just feel like if you're gonna have Lilo in your deck, then you need to have more higher lore characters and the ability to get them out faster. And the fact that you have Hades and Rapunzel, which I like and agree with, means that you can make up for the card disadvantage when those characters eventually are banished.
Right.
But I mean, first of all, most of the time when Mad Hatter is banished, you're drawing a card anyway, at least one.
Right.
And then when Cusco is banished, he's taking something with him, and he's hard to deal with. So oftentimes he's a tempo gain and straight advantage gain. Right. So you can make up that advantage with those 2 cards as it is. So.
Right. I think that's the hard part here is that this particular list, we've decided to go with Genies and John Silver's, which are great cards, right? Like I'm not hating on the cards, but I just look at that and go, well, if I just had those 6 cards as like 3 Just in Times and 3 Maximus, is my deck just better?
Your deck's different. I mean, like, I don't know. I like Genie even in the aggro list.
Sure.
But I don't like 2 of You Have Forgotten Me. I don't like Jasper. I certainly don't like Hey Hey. And I don't like 12 1-drops.
Like I wasn't going to hate on the Hey Hey.
You weren't going to hate on the Hey Hey?
I wasn't going to. I think it's necessary? No, not at all. Of course. I just wasn't going to hate on the chicken. That's all.
That's fair. I mean, I think I'd rather have, sometimes I'd rather have the chicken than, so support is an ability where you feel like you're going to be playing from behind. And so, because you have to use 2 characters to make it worth it. So like you're
sure.
AA to make like one of your, I don't know, like
sure
2 X's a 3X.
Right.
And that has to swing into a character to get the effect on it. So like, that's where in a deck like this, I wouldn't play it, but there are
so for example, in the previous deck, like I actually like Hey Hey in the Amber Amethyst decks because of a Pascal. If you're not playing like the more control version, you're playing more of like the aggressive version, because like a card like Pascal all of a sudden like has this ability to trade up and do other things like with support in general. Or I mean, I've seen it happen, but like Maximus swings in, supports Hey Hey, and all of a sudden or supports Pascal, and all of a sudden you're like your 1-cost Pascal that picked you up 3 random lore and now also just took out like their 4 or 5 drop, and you're just like extraordinary value. But in this particular list, it's likely, if I start really looking at cards I would look to cut down on, it's probably like Hey Hey is definitely one of them. Jasper is another one. I think that his stat line is great, but for me, the Jasper and John Silver in this deck, they're not really helping your overall goal. So I like, he's just a 2/4, right? Like his His secondary effect, while it matters, it doesn't matter often enough. So I would rather just play something else.
If you're ahead, it doesn't help you. If you're behind, like it may help you, but like
Sure.
you want to be playing. I think you want to. If you have a deck with Lilo and Flynn, you want to be playing from ahead.
Right.
And if you feel like you're going to have to come back from being behind, you have Genie, you have Mother Knows Best, you have Hades, you have Rapunzel, etc. So like, I would not be playing cards that like I automatically put you up. He's good with Rapunzel. Honestly, like if you just want a guy with the stats, I know people that this might be where the Smee comes into another deck, for example.
Yep. No, Smee. I didn't even touch on Smee last time because I spent way too much time on earlier in this week. But Smee Smee was under the radar for sure, and it's definitely a card again. Like Smee and Rapunzel are a match made in heaven, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I do. You mentioned a little bit here. I really love the Hades in this deck. I think Hades is like, it might be one of the more criminally underplayed cards, in my honest opinion.
I agree. Yep.
I think the uninkable cost like seems like a really high cost. I don't think everyone truly understands what he represents. Now, granted, in this particular list, again, I'm not certain what we're doing all the time with our resources, but this also enables like that turn 7 play. Like if we find a way to fit 4 just-in-times in here, which shocker, it's not difficult to do that. This is another card that later on in the game, you're just like, oh, I can play my Hades. I can get back a 5 cost on turn 7 and then just in time it. I know it seems ridiculous and crazy, but with cards like Rapunzel, with cards like Mad Hatter, you accrue card advantage. Like you accrue these cards and you set up these long-term plays. And when this deck is really positioned to pressure very early with your Lilos, with your Hanses, and and your Cuscos and things like that, a play like that late in the game is just backbreaking. It's if you can just get back your Cusco and play Hades plus Cusco, all of a sudden you're threatening 4 lore and a card with ward. Like that, those are game-winning potential cards.
Agreed.
All right. For me, the You've Forgotten Me's, in all honesty, if we want to have like a straight conversation about just You've Forgotten Me, I think there was like 50% of the time I thought it was great. And then the other 50, I thought it was like the worst thing you could have been doing. And I think that's like where it's probably going to stand most of the time. Because in the end, unless you're so far ahead in a game to where you're cutting out your opponent's ways to interact with the current board, then it's not a very good play. If you're in an even playing field and or honestly, if you're behind, the card is very bad if you're behind, because if you're behind and you're paying for to get rid of 2 cards in your opponent's hand, but you have no interaction for the board, then you're still just behind because they're going to draw off the top and still be able to move the game forward and play forward. Whereas like you're not.
And given the makeup of what you see in the top 8, if that's a representation of the meta, they're playing friends for free.
Right.
You're paying 4 to take 2 cards away.
Like, and again, there were 6 Amethyst decks. Every single one of them had 4 friends in it.
Right.
So like their turn 3 play is, or their turn 4 play is exert my guy, draw 2 cards. And then your turn 4 is use all of my resources to make you discard 2 cards.
Right.
Those 2 things, they don't work together. Let's catch up with chat for a second here. So first of all, shout out to Neil. Hey Neil, how you doing? Second of all, we have the card advantage didn't feel good. If your opponent can catch back up in a couple turns, I don't think it ends up being worth it. So I think this is in reference to just in time.
Yeah.
I can totally respect that feeling, but I can also tell you that the amount of games where you're just like Lilo into Stitch, or I'm sorry, Lilo into Zimba into Maximus. Now, granted, this deck in particular didn't have Maximus, which I think Maximus is pretty good. I actually think Goofy is actually better than I was giving it credit for to begin with, because his 6 health is great against Maui. So there's like layers here that you can really make a conscious decision as you're moving forward and evolving the metagame. But I think the ability for this card to just get out in front of you, it only adds the layers of pressure for your opponent to always have the answers. And that's the biggest thing that you can do, is that you're just like, yep, I'm going to pressure to the metal. I'm going to play cards like Mad Hatter. I'm going to play cards like Cusco. Honestly, like any cards that end up having 4 or 5 health are spectacular because you have Rapunzel to just replenish all this disadvantage to yourself, which I think is the biggest takeaway. Playing against the deck was rough in Denver myself. I played Tempo deck overall. There you go. So, yeah, I think that this is one of those decks in the end that this is a version, right? Like, I think there's a bunch of, but honestly, this is my favorite part of this, is that this top eight decks, all successful decks on the day, but you could take them in different directions, which is what I'm really enjoying so far about, honestly, the meta game as a whole. But this is another one that I think that this particular list looks like an incredible, great proof of concept as like a building block moving forward.
Agreed.
All right, next. Okay, so we have top 8. We have Brandon Bremont. This is the one of two Amethyst Steel decks that was played, and they're when we look at both of these, we're going to look at both of these back to back. So the other list here is Brooks Clark, who was top 4, same type of list. Now there are some key differences in this list, and the one thing that I find really, really interesting, Scott, is the items, right? So for Brendan, we have 3 Magic Mirrors, 3 Pocket Watch. For Brooks, we have 1 and 2, right? So if we just start with items, of these 2 lists, I mean, I know the answer, but of these 2 lists, which of those do you think is more refined?
I mean, clearly the less copies is more refined.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is it about the Magic Mirror right now? This is a card that we've been high on for months, and honestly, it's just a very good card in general. But why is it important that you just don't need more than at max 2 of this card?
It's uninkable. You don't want to play it on. It's usually a bad play to play on curve, opening yourself up to opposing beasts and basically just not playing a character on the same drop. So I don't think you want to play it on 2. It's going to be really, really difficult for you ever to be able to activate more than 1 in a turn anyway.
Right.
And it's not usually, even if you had the ink, it's not usually the best play to be activating more than 1 in the same turn anyway. I mean,
right.
Besides the fact that you want to be drawing a card and then usually playing that card, if you have other things like pocket watches in play, you want to be, now you're almost committing yourself to basically spending 5 ink a turn.
Right.
You already have 3 friends. You already have queens. You already have Maleficents, the small Maleficent. So I just don't think I think you're just going to have hands where you're just clogged if you play this many of these items.
Yeah. So another core difference in these lists is fire the cannon. Nope, sorry, take that back. Yeah, fire the cannons. So in our top 8 list, we have no fire the cannons, no Captain Hook. And our top 4 list, we're going the wrong way, guys. Sorry about that. Our top 4 list, we have 3 Captain Hook and then 4 fire the cannons. Now, this is another, my humble opinion, without asking the player the question, right? Without asking Brandon the question, do you think that's an inkable versus uninkable choice?
It appears to be that way. I mean, considering this has 3 Magic Mirrors, then you're at that's part of the issue. I think it all flows down from there as to how many uninkables you want to run.
Right.
This one seems like it has way less uninkables in it. Whereas Brandon understands the power of Amethyst to be able to draw cards, so he can play more uninkables. But I mean, he obviously made top 4, so I don't think he really had an issue with it, with that many uninkables on the day.
Yeah, it's looking like this list is 14. 7 for the big guys, 4 grab your swords, 3 magic mirror.
Yeah, it sounds right. 14.
And then this list we have 3 for hook, 4 for cannons, 4 for grab your swords, and 1 for magic mirror. And then the 5 in the middle. So it's definitely more, slightly more, about I think 3 more if I'm doing that math quickly and correct on stream. It's fine, guys. So yeah. When I first looked at the list and, by comparison, when you have 2 lists in a top 8 of the same, basically the same concept, it's very easy to just take them and compare them and see what may have been successful. Obviously, the top 8, top 4, it's a win different, right? So it is a difference, but it's 1 win of a difference in the end, without knowing what the final standings were going into the top 8.
And this
The
is
other
no broom. This is no brooms, and that one has brooms.
Right. So this is what I'm kind of starting. This is why I was kind of nitpicking things just to get to other cores. But again, so this list now has your 4 brooms for Mickey, and then this list has 0. Now I just think it's really interesting that you can see two successful decks in the same event in the same day, and honestly, we've already deciphered like 15 cards difference.
Yeah.
And this is just more of like the proof of concept here of that, like, we're far from solved. Like,
oh yeah,
we are so very, very far from solved in a metagame. And there's so many of these conversations online that go like, oh, it's boring, it's stale. It's like, guys, it's been 3 weeks, and every single event has a new list that's different from the other ones, or in some fashion by numbers. Like, it's only 60 cards, right? So like, when you switch out 6 cards, and I'm just like literally just 6, that's 10%. That's a big difference. Like like people don't look at it that way, but 10% is a huge difference in a metagame and in a choice and a decision. So like, when you look at these 2 successful decks in top 8, top 4 here, and they're 15 plus cards different, they're almost different decks.
Yeah, sure.
In a way, right? Like, it's the same concept, same strategy, but the deck itself is 25% different, maybe more, maybe 30% different. So when you start really looking at those, you have to really understand that the choices made in this are very, very interesting. Like, for example, this list decided to play 2 Mauis, and then the other one did not. So like, that's a card that's probably the first card. If I'm being honest, the first card I'm cutting from this deck is that Maui. Yeah. I don't think that there's any way on planet Earth that I need that Maui to win any game. So I would definitely be looking to cut that. But aside from that, right, and honestly, like, and I'm not, again, this is just about learning from success. And when we look at this list here and we see the numbers and the difference here and how it looks a lot more refined, I think it probably is. But even here, Scott, let's just look at some of these numbers. Like, do I really need 4 Broom and 4 Mickey? Even if I'm playing the Mickey Broom combo, right? Even if that's a choice that I'm going to make, do I really need 4 of each of those cards?
I mean, probably not. I mean, I especially wouldn't play 4 Mickeys. When I have Hans and Captain Hook, it just opens up different options for what you're gonna, like. I just can't imagine you're actually, and you have 2 Jafar. I just can't imagine you're actually playing Mickey on 4 unless you have a Broom on 2 or 3. So, and you don't want to have a Broom on 3. He also has no small Tinkerbell here, right? So he can't.
Yeah, that's another key difference here, is that he has no small Tink, and he has less 3-cost characters in general. Because we only have 3 and 4. Yeah. Whereas the other deck had 4, 4, and 4. So like, we're talking about 7 to 12. So in terms of making sure my friends on the other side is going to stick, and is going to draw me 2 cards, that's not like, the odds of that are less. And that's what it's just another thing of what I think is important here, of like, taking a version of both of these decks is likely the better deck.
Right. Well, yeah, combining them, I think, is
right. Like just taking these 2, finding the best mesh of them is likely closer to like the more complete deck. But it is interesting to see the different choices within the same event.
Yeah, I mean, like something like Beast, is a metagame call. I mean, I would probably be running 4 of them at the beginning of the event, but now
what was that?
What
was the card you just said?
Beast.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're expecting extra Amber Amethyst or Amethyst, you're just expecting Amethyst in general, he has a target Magic Mirror and a target in Pocket Watch. But like, if the meta shifts, I mean, he's obviously an inkable card, so there's a card you can look at getting rid of there. But yeah, it's definitely a mash of these 2. Some things may fall by the wayside. I mean, I can't stand Eric, for example, in any deck, but it is what it is.
Right. And so the interesting takeaway here is now neither of these lists have Rafiki, which is a defining card in some of the Ruby Amethyst decks. So that's just another choice, right? It's just like, man, I don't even have that card. And then I think the other one for me is the Queen. So 3 here and 4 in the other list. While I think the card is very good, I just don't find myself needing 4 of that card, right?
I would play it because she's just inkable. That's the thing for me is
So is it just that my 5-cost characters are just all inkable and they're like they have utility most of the time?
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I can get behind that strategy.
But I think I would be playing like more. I think you need to play more of the high end, and I think you need to play probably less of the. I like as much as I like Jafar, I just think he winds up being like a casualty of all this. And again, if you're going to run the Mickey Broom, I don't think you need 4 of each. I do really like the Hans when you're running the Fire the Cannons. Like if you're not running, I don't think he's a card you can just play because I don't think the 1 damage does anything.
Right.
But if you are playing extra damage base removal, he becomes much better.
Which is notable here because this list does not have Hans and does not have Fire the Cannons.
Right.
So again, I agree with those decisions. Like you need there's all these different levels of these packages within the concepts. And I definitely agree that if you don't have one, you shouldn't have the other.
Is there Smasher and not Smash in the other one?
I believe that is also true. Yes. Okay. So that's the difference here is that like this list has the Smash, but no Fire the Cannons, no Hans. And then this list has the Fire Cannons with Hans, but no Smash.
And with Captain Hook. So
And with Hook, yes.
I can't say I know the right answer.
No, and that's the crazy thing. And that's the whole, again, like this is like, I'm going to keep going back to it. That's why like we don't have a solved metagame. Like I don't care what the stats are. I don't care what the numbers are. Like these lists right here, both successful, both had 5+ wins, you know, in a 40-person event, which they traveled to, which they paid to play into, like, and the lists are 25% different. Like, and I think that if you put them together, you would end up with a list that was even cards that we just said, like Rafiki. I'm not saying that every deck has to play a Zeus, but it's another card like that's not represented here. And I think Zeus is more important when you're not playing Maui. So like there's just other cards along this line that this list is far from the best version of itself. And it's about
I like it.
I love that because it just means that, you know, in 3 weeks, the game's not solved by any which means, even though we have an online platform. Like, yeah, it's great to be able to play 125,000 games, but you still have to find a way to make the best version of things. And we're so far from that, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, what I like about this color combination is that it's complementary to each other. You're not using one color to make up for another color's weakness. You're using them to be complementary. So like, I hadn't even thought about, and again, I think the other version actually does this better, but because of the shiftability on Tinkerbell. But like I saw a lot of Elsa Tinkerbell synergy going on. Like, it's not something that I had really thought this 6-drop and this 8-drop synergize with one another. But you know, Elsa, you know, exerting down 2 characters, and then Tink in this list a lot of times would have the ability to have her secondary ability actually hit a much smaller target to do damage to a much bigger or more advantageous target. I thought was really, really cool for 2 high-cost cards that like are very good on their own, but are even more powerful when that have synergy together.
The last card before we move on, the big Dr. Facilier. This is a card, again, throughout the entire event. It felt weird. It's like there's lists that either have baby Dr. Facilier, but not the big one, or they have the big one, but not the little one. Like, is there any feeling towards any of that? Like, should you just find a way to play a few little ones, like just to have the option for shift, or is it just not important?
It depends. Like the small one can be a good anti-aggro card. And if you are playing Pocket Watch, he has some additional ways of taking care of early drops. So if you want to play like two in one, if you can get away with it, I think that's totally fine. I do like the big one as a one of because he has to have other characters in play to have value. So you can't just play him on 7 and move on with life. Like you have to play him on 7 and have other guys in play that you can immediately get back to your hand, which usually, I mean, if they're small idiots, they usually just provide ink for the rest of the turn, like the rest of the game. Like he just gets you, like he's just immediately like draw 2, for example, that are inkable. So I do like him. I don't know that you need to shift him because by shifting him, you're implying that like he's actually going to be an active participant in combat. And I don't know that he even needs to be if you have other, because you need other cards regardless. So
Right.
it's just a nice to have. So I like him as a one of. If you can fit another uninkable in your deck, I don't know that you need to shift him, but it doesn't hurt. Like I mean, playing him for 5 is like getting him on 5 a lot of times means that your 3 drops are coming back to your hand. Playing him on 7 means your later drops are coming back to your hand.
Right. Like for me, like playing him on 5 represents getting my Rafiki back or getting
Right.
my Maleficent back. Like
Right.
these cards are impactful cards that I don't ever mind getting back.
Yeah, that's fair.
But even in like just in this world where playing him at 5 later in the game, like on like so you can set up like a turn 8, play my Dr. Facilier plus my Rafiki, like so my Rafiki runs into something and then I just get it back. Like I'm a big fan of that line. But again, I don't have all the answers, right? Like I just know that it's very interesting seeing all of these different Amethyst lists playing one or the other, but there's very few of them that play both. And I'm just like, I wonder why that is. That's all. So let's get into the next one. So our next list is top 4 Ryan Miles. We have the Amethyst Emerald. This is more of a mid-range deck, right? Like I wouldn't call this a full-on control. Now, this is the first one playing a card like Befuddle, which is what I was waiting to get to this. A card like Befuddle has been honestly a very interesting take. I think that at one point, Scott, you or I were, I don't know if your opinions changed at all, but I know that like we weren't very happy with like what that card represents. Has anything changed like in your thought process for Befuddle?
I see people playing it. I'm still not a huge fan of it. I still don't think it has enough. I still don't think it has enough use. I mean, in this deck slanted more aggro, given Flynn, given some other 2 lore characters. So I think it has actually more use here as just a straight bounce card. You already have Mother's Knows Best, so it's just like one of those, and it can be inked.
Right.
So I actually think it's decent here for those purposes more than like I've seen it in like Ruby Amethyst, just this delaying tactic, and it's like you're only preventing like 1 lore like from being gained. I mean, obviously, I don't think the game we're at a point yet where like you're playing a 1 drop on 1, you're playing a 2 drop on 2, you're playing a 3 drop on 3, 4, etc. So like Befuddle winds up just being like a removal card because they don't have the time to replay the card that you actually befuddled. Right. So like if you befuddle that Flynn, like you're never going to see it again. I don't think that's true.
Right.
So because of that, I just don't think it does enough for especially in control lists. But I think in the tempo list like this, I think it's actually better.
Just to add on, not only might it not do enough, it also gives them another option to utilize that as a resource.
Yep.
In most cases. So it's interesting. Now, the biggest argument I've seen is for specifically the Ruby Amethyst, which these lists moving up have it, and we're going to talk about that as well. But it's more of a, well, I'm going to utilize it to get rid of the Zimba so I can run my Archimedes into whatever.
Sure.
And like my debate for all that is, well, you shouldn't be playing Archimedes, so it doesn't matter. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
So this is the first one where we're seeing the Olaf. Is Olaf just, I don't even know. Like what is Olaf representing in the metagame that we're like, we want to play Olaf?
So what I like is 1/3s are actually better in aggressive decks than 2/2s.
Okay.
So in Lorcana in general, willpower is more important than strength.
Right.
So because of damage-based removal, willpower actually has 2 uses, where strength only has 1 use, which is challenging. So I want people to understand that. So 1/3s, which I think are only Olaf and Minnie Mouse, actually are better in aggro decks because they have a chance of gaining more lore, which is your aggro stat, than a 2/2 does. Mm-hmm. So a 2/2 usually just trades with another 2/2. Well, the 2/2 will eventually trade with the 1/3, but the 1/3 usually will gain 2 lore out of it. So 1/3s are actually better in aggro lists. And in this list, I actually like it again because you're playing Megara. So now Olaf becomes a 3/3 when you activate Megara. Now all of a sudden he can trade very favorably with a lot of 2 drops and survive to tell the tale. So in this list, I think he's very powerful because you're playing Megara, who I also like. So I would try to maximize on both of theirs because Megara actually is really good here with Pascal, really good here with Olaf, really good here with my least favorite card, Cheshire Cat. So it's really good. I guess it's really good with Jasper, just giving you stats. So I actually really like it in this list in general. Um, that card, but that to me is where Olaf comes into play. It's more of an aggro card, just like Mini is.
Yeah. So for me, first of all, shout out to Ryan particularly. This was the first list in the top 8 that when I was really looking over everything closely and studying it, for this video, it was the first one I built. I actually built this deck. I think this deck is really interesting. I think it plays on a lot of really fun lines and a lot of really unexpected lines, and a lot of it is just what you just said. A card like Meg really changes the outcomes of games when your opponent just simply does not expect you to have it. And I know that like now we're gonna go this crazy route where people are like, oh well, this makes Vicious Betrayal good. No, it's not. All right, Vicious Betrayal is not good.
Right.
Don't play that card. Meg is good because at the end of the day, you still have a one lore character in play that represents other threatening things. God, don't play Vicious Betrayal. But the ability of Vicious Betrayal on a card, very, very powerful. This was honestly one of the probably under the radar decks after the top 8. This was the only one that was, that made it. This was it did hit a top 4, but it does a lot of really unfair things. The Meg, in my opinion, it's we talk about putting numbers down all the time. Meg should be a 4 of. In all honesty, like her impact is that good. Now, the other things that are very interesting to me are the Peter Pan. I actually think he's like potentially the worst card in this deck. And I say that in all honesty, just because he seems like one of the biggest weak spots in the deck. Because he's the easiest, and I know like we're in a world where not everyone's even playing Fire the Cannons, right? And when I totally get that. But is my 3-cost play worth worth just dying on turn 4 or turn 5 to grab your swords and things like that? A lot of other decks are now playing cards like Jetsam, and like they're playing answers to it. So since there's other decks just playing answers to it, I don't really find it necessary to play at 3. I would just utilize that somewhere else in general. But all in all, this deck was a lot of fun. This deck has a lot of power. I think it's under the radar. I think if you're looking to do something different, it's definitely a deck that I would pick up and start playing.
I think the Pan is here for the 2-3-cost songs.
For the what?
For the songs.
Right. I guess my problem, I guess the end all be all here is Pan just the best 3-cost card after the first 4 that we already are playing? Is that just what the debate is? I mean, because we already have 14 2-drops, so now we're saying that we need 16. I'm sorry, 14 3s, so now we need 16 3s to make friends good. I just don't even know that's true.
No, I don't know. He's probably better than Jasper. I mean, I do. He's probably on par with Cheshire Cat. He does give you outs to, Pongos and things like that. So I think he's probably fine.
Right.
It's just a matter of what you want to be. You just want you want your 3-cost character to survive. He doesn't survive Fire the Cannon, so like that's not even necessarily going to be the case.
Right.
So it just depends on what you're doing. I have more of an issue with like the 6 drops, to be honest with you, than I do having 14 3-drops. So
that's fair. Yeah, John Silver. It's actually John Silver for me on the day was a very interesting thing. Like every time he came into play, I'm like, oh, that's good. But then, like as the game kept going, I don't even know that it really mattered. Like it was a really weird thing where it's just like as I'm watching like his games develop and these plays happening, I'm just like, it looks like because he's a card that has a lot of ability, right? Like there's a lot of words on that card. But I in this particular event, in the games that I saw him played, I think I actually ended up becoming pretty unimpressed by him.
The goal is to have your 2 want to be challenged 5-drops force them into be challenged. The problem is a lot of times that's what they're going to do anyway because those characters have 3 lore. Like
right.
So like and live the dream. Cheshire Cat is my only exerted character. Play John Silver. I guess that can happen, but I fail. It just seems like it's not going to happen very often. And because he costs more than a lot of the removal, I just think he just doesn't have enough. He's not fast enough to impact the game. Theoretically, it looks good, but I think I'd rather just have Genie most of the time.
Fair. Lots of people hanging out in the stream. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything so far, so we can break it down when we're done. We got 3 more decks to get through here, and this next one I think will be, for me, the most fun. But oh boy. All right, Scott. So we have the second place and the top 8 Ruby Amethyst list here. All right. So I'm gonna rant first. Okay. So we're gonna rant first. Every other deck in this top 8 is 60 cards. Every other deck, right? And I know when we think about going and saying, oh, well, 2 of the decks were not 60 cards. Okay. So from the door, 2 of the people were wrong. And this is like just a clear understanding of how card games work. And not only are they wrong, but they're actually affecting things to have greater success within this deck. So this is already stapled as, for weeks, it was the best deck in the game. For weeks. We can make an argument that for months we could say that it was the best deck in the game, well before we even had Elsa's and Ursula's and like Maui's. Like, it was still at a point in time, you can go back months ago when we were reporting on the meta before the full release, which was still the idea of forming these cores, right? We talked about the Amethyst Steel core. Like, the Ruby Amethyst core is another one that, like, yeah, you can play a completely different 60 than someone else by like 15 or 20 cards. But what you should not do is go, oh, I like what that guy's doing, I'm just going to add 11 cards to my deck.
Yes.
Like, that's the worst thing you can do. You're not helping yourself in any manner here at all. Like, play 60 cards, get to 60. I promise you your deck is better at 60 than it is at 61, as long as you understand. And like, listen, here's the real truth, guys. You can't build a deck that beats everything. It just doesn't exist. You're going to have weak spots, and if you don't have weak spots, then there's an internal flaw in the design of the game, and I do not think that that's true for any deck in the game right now. Every deck that you've seen that has success, that's won an event, that's seen multiple times, they all have a weakness, every single one of them. So you can't just be like, I'm just going to put 7 more cards in my deck. I'm just going to put 10 more cards in my deck. Like, God, just build a better deck. Like, just get to a better deck. I promise you. So now that my rant's over, unless you want to continue.
Well, the question I have, and the question I would ask the deck builders is, why does Ruby Amethyst have 70 cards in it, 71 cards, whatever you want to call, but Steel Amethyst has 60? All the card draws coming from Amethyst, right?
Or Amber Amethyst.
So right. So all the card draws coming from Amethyst or Amber in the case of having both. So why? I understand that there's more board wipes and things like that, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, Ruby doesn't give you any card draw. So what are you getting in one control list that you're not getting in the other, when it just doesn't make any sense to me?
No, it's not. It's not going to.
No.
But anyway, all right. So the key differences in these 2 lists are obviously the Sergeant Tibbs.
Yes, right. Sure.
Right. The differences are the number of Mickey Mouses. One of us has 4, the other one has 2. The items are quite different. We have 3/2/2 and then 3/1/1.
And 3/1/1/2.
3/1/1/2.
Yeah, there's a pocket watch over there too.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. So it's 2/3/2/2, and then it's 1/3/1/2. So clear differences there. For what it's worth, that might be the 4-card difference in their list. I'm not even sure. I'm not 100% positive, but that might be literally the 4-card difference with the Mickey Mouses. There has to be some other thing here. Oh, we have Jafar's. I think they all have. I think it's the same cards. I can't find a difference within the list, right? Like, it's all of the same cards.
There's a 1 of Ursula over here on.
Okay,
Jonathan
so there's
Ball.
no Ursula in the deck with 70 cards.
Right. Can't find room for that card.
Right. So we couldn't go to 71 for Ursula. All right.
There's Facilier in Hung's deck, and there's no Facilier in Jonathan's deck.
All right. And there's the
But otherwise it's just numbers at that point.
So, okay. Let's just have a session here, right? How about we just take Hung's deck, which is 70 cards in it, and we just take 10 cards out of it and we call it even. Like, it's just a better deck, right? Yeah. So what are the first 10 cards we're removing from this deck?
All 4 Brave Little Tailors, the 2 Ursula's Cauldrons, the 2 Goofies, the 2 Befuddles, and the 4 Archimedes. I don't even know how many that is.
All right, so that's more than 10. Great. I think that's 12. So we take out 12 cards. What are the 2 cards we're putting in that we're missing?
Probably a 3rd Rafiki and a 4th Queen right off the bat. Are we missing anything? I don't know that we're literally missing anything.
I don't think it's possible that we're missing anything, right. But I'm okay to be wrong.
Or like a 4th big Aladdin, a 3rd small Aladdin, like whatever.
A 4th Gaston.
The good cards.
Sure. But just to clarify here, guys, took us 30 seconds to do that. 30 seconds to cut 10 cards. Don't play with 70 cards in your deck. Just don't. I can't even be polite about it. Like, there's no excuse to play 70 cards in your deck. There is no mill deck. B, this bullshit myth of, oh my God, I'm gonna mill in the mirror. That's just not true. You're both playing Brooms, which is a whole other debate in itself. If you even need that card, spoiler alert, you don't need that card. It's not the reason you're gonna mill or not mill in a control mirror. And if you did that, the clock ran out well beforehand. Okay, like there's no way you're milling in 50 minutes. Like it's preposterous. Concede earlier, in all honesty. Like, if you really worry about it, concede the game earlier. But yeah, we've talked about this deck over and over the last 3 weeks. I don't think, other than this being 7 cards and 10 cards above 60, this deck is great. This deck is powerful. It's one of the better decks in the game. It's one of the more it's one of the more refined decks. But I also think that comes with, this is what a lot of players were gravitating towards before the release of the game even happened. And I think that's why you might. I personally don't think that we've seen the best version of this deck at all yet. Again, I think there's a lot of meta decisions. I think that these 2 colors actually offer you a ton of choice, a little bit more than what you're seeing now. Like, for example, Scott said remove the Goofies. I actually like the Goofies in the deck. I actually like, a single Tigger in the deck. I think that they're like alternate answers to where, when my Maui is bad, I have another card that is good. And I don't think it's to say that I'm going to the extent of removing Maui, but I don't mind having these alternative characters in the game, because I think you can get away with playing way more 1s and 2s than just your item slot.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, moral of the story for this one, just cut to 60. I can't say it enough. All right, so our last deck is the winner, Anthony King. Shout out to winner again for PPG Denver, and we have what he called was Song Aggro, Amber Steel aggro. This is a deck that, for all intents and purposes, I think was really born when Ursula's Necklace was born. Even though there is no sight of Ursula's Necklace in here, because I think we all realize really quickly that you actually just don't need that card for this deck to be good. This version's a little different. It's definitely faster than like the more control versions. I still think in some of the control lists, you may, similar to how there's like a 1 of Magic Mirror, I think you might find room for a 1 of Ursula's Necklace. That remains to be seen. But this was a deck, Scott, that you got to call the finals, and I think that after the finals, you found yourself very impressed by this list for a particular reason. So why don't you walk me through what you really enjoyed about this deck?
I really liked the way it used a whole new world, and that's actually the card that's replaced Ursula's Necklace, to be honest with you. That card didn't exist when that was first spoiled.
Right.
I was playing with a lot of this with Ursula's necklace before that. The use of a whole new world in this list was very, very powerful, using it at the right times. But really, what this deck has proven to me is that the best way to get around board wipes is to play Stitch Rockstar. So the ability to come back in the game with Stitch Rockstar has been very impressive to me.
Yeah, I thought I think Rockstar has been one of the more interesting characters, in all honesty. There was a point in time where it was like the greatest card in the game.
Yeah.
And then there was a point in time where it was like unplayable somehow, which I don't think was ever really true, but that was like the public consensus of it. And then I think that, you know, I think it was like, I think George said there was 500 people on stream on Twitch, another 200 over here. So you're talking about 700 people watching it live, watching the replays and things like that. I think our stream of it has over 4,000 views or something like that. So once you start realizing, like once people saw it and saw what Stitch is capable of, it makes a really interesting decision of like, man, why aren't more Amber decks playing Stitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that card is just very good. And I'm not certain, right? Like this is a conversation we actually had in Discord this week of how many 1 and 2s do you really need to make him that good? Like in this particular list, I think if we bring it back up, it's 19 1-cost characters and then 8 2-cost characters. So that's 25 by quick math, right? No, 27. So that's like half your deck.
Yep.
Is that too much?
Probably. I mean, like it depends on what the goal like of using them is. I mean, like you can't, by having the redundancy, you have the ability to start the game lore earlier. You have a lot of characters in here that like you can't quest with on 2 if you play them on 1.
Right.
Like you can't expose your small Stitch. You don't really usually want to expose your Captain Hook unless they don't have they didn't play a 1-drop. Simba does not trade well with any other 1-drop except for Lilo. So like you have a lot of times where you're not swinging on 2 to gain lore. So it's like, but you want to be playing those characters. So it's good to have the redundancy there. I think you could probably get away with like cutting the goons, and like I would search far and wide for a better answer with Eric as a 2-drop. So like it's not necessarily that I want to necessarily, the only ones I would play less of literally is probably goons, and try to find a better 2-drop if one exists. I haven't thought about it tremendously.
So like is Minnie Mouse better?
I mean, maybe. I can't stand Eric, so probably. Like
no, I don't actually think that they're that far apart. I'm not sure that either is like ideal, but this like world where Prince Eric is for some reason the default 2-cost character in Steel decks kind of blows my mind. Now, would you go to the extent of playing Aladdin?
I've thought about it. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I think it might be a good call. It depends though how much steel you're expecting. Like you don't want to lose your guy. Like you don't want to lose too many guys when they play
Grab Your Swords, Tink
or Tinkerbell. Yeah, but like I would consider it for sure and see how it works out. I know you're a fan of the Lantern.
I thought it looked very good. And honestly, even we saw a lot of Amber Steel on the day. I think it was on stream like 4 times across 2 different players. And it's honestly really, really powerful.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's like good outside of this particular combination. And I also don't think it's good unless you're playing the aggro version, in my humble opinion. But
it's really good with Rockstar. It's really good after a whole new world to just basically have more resources than your opponent can.
It's also this weird setup of since we have 27, low drop cards, often on turns like 3 and 4 and 5, you had seen like, oh, I will play my 1-cost and play Lantern. And then my Lantern, like the next turn just like helps me afford everything. Obviously, the biggest thing is the full-fledged combo. All of it is Stitch into Lantern into Rockstar on turn 3. I think that's like, in my humble opinion, the strongest thing you can do to start a game of Disney Lorcana. I haven't seen anyone lose with that opening hand. It's unbelievably power. It's really, really hard to interact with. And yeah, it's really, really good. So just for that alone, I think I would be playing Lantern. I don't know if I could ever go to the extent of playing 4 of them, but in a world where if I'm trying to use the mulligan rule as best as I possibly could, it might be an option. Because again, like when you see those 3 cards in your opening hand, I don't think you lose that game, like almost ever.
Yeah, agreed. The only changes I would really make to this, and even look to make to this, like where I even see anything you even can do, is the cards right in the middle with the smash and the goons. Otherwise, and just changing Eric for other 2-drops. Otherwise, I think the deck's pretty tight. I would try as best as possible to get to the max Tinkerbells. I would, and just substitute some cards here and there, but the core of it is all there.
I think going to max on Tinkerbells is great. I think this is another deck where I'm really happy to play Hades in.
Yeah, sure.
It's another deck where I'm really happy to play Party Your World in. So those are things that I would definitely be looking to add. I'm not saying like we're adding 4 of each of those cards or anything like that, but I think some number of them is really good. I saw a lot of games where it was won honestly just with Rockstar and Tinks in the end. It was like I'm just gonna beat up on my opponent early, get my lore here, and then I'm just gonna outvalue my opponent either on board presence with Tink or in hand presence with adding to the board with Stitch. I was very, very impressed with Anthony's gameplay throughout the day. I was very impressed with his deck as general. We watched a game 1. In game 1 of the finals, it was like a really, really strugglesome game. And it almost looked like, man, like maybe this is actually just unwinnable. And then games 2 and 3 was like almost the complete opposite, where he just outvalued his opponent from like turn 5 on, and his opponent was Ruby Amethyst, and that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Yep, agreed.
All right, so before we get into this next section here, we have if you add lower cost songs, Sebastian. I don't think we're ever playing Sebastian unless there's 4 cost songs that are playable. We didn't mention this. There is a world where I would consider playing Hakuna Matata just as a inkable card.
Not in this list, but in other lists.
Yeah. No, not in this particular list, but in other aerial list.
Yeah.
I think like playing a 1 or a 2 like Hakuna Matata, literally, I'm not kidding. It's just the times that you're going to play Hakuna Matata, super duper low. But the times that you're going to be like, oh, cool, I got my resource for the turn, that's fine. I'm really okay.
I don't think you can play a playset of it, but
no.
You're fit, just in general, another card. Like, how many Rapunzels would you try to fit in this list?
In this list, I don't know that I mean, like, I'm not saying I wouldn't play it, but I don't think you're playing 4 in this list. I do think, again, if we go back to this core, personally, the list that I've talked about on a couple different videos now is more of a mid-range list. Mm-hmm. And I think Rapunzels and Smees and all of those things are just not an evolution of this, because I think that this list in particular is very different than the next tier of it, or the next the next version of it, I should say, not even tier. But like there is a version of this deck that cuts out on the ones and lowers everything, but plays Smee, plays Maximus or Goofy, and plays Rapunzel and things like that as instead of just pressuring early and like retaining a win with Stitch, you're more or less like, I'm just gonna like steadily pressure you throughout the game. And at the end of the game, if I didn't draw my Stitch, if I didn't draw this quote combo of cards, I'm still drawing cards that have 2 lore on them. I'm still drawing ways to refill my hand and like things like that. And I think it's honestly, unlike the 2 Steel Amethyst list that we compared, I think the mid-range version of this and the aggro version of this are actually like entirely different decks. Like that deck I don't think that deck plays Lantern, right? Like you're just removing that card entirely. You're trying to set up different things. I think they're very, very different decks.
Okay.
How do you feel about LeFou as a 2-drop? That's another one. Like, it's a 1/2. It has 2 lore, like maybe instead of Prince, if that's what you're trying to be more aggressive. The one thing I will say about all of those things is that if we really started trying to be even more aggressive, I think I would try and find some number of Hercules. because if we have like a 1 cost 2 lore, a 2 cost 2 lore, and like I only have Zimba, then you don't have enough ways to protect. I would much rather have Zimba and Hercules in this version, just to like get everything possible out of my early game before I start comboing off with Whole New Worlds and Rockstars.
I'd rather have any of these 2 drops than Eric, so I'm totally fine with both of them.
Yeah. So. Eric's a downer, guys. Eric's a downer. All right, so this was a lot of fun, but we're gonna get into what I think is the most interesting, right, Scott?
Yes.
What's the most common thing that we've heard since release? One of the most common things, I should say.
It's hard to find cards.
Hard to find cards. Cards are expensive.
Cards are expensive.
Decks are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys are in chat right now, and you maybe don't know the numbers, I know the numbers. Let me know in the numbers what you think the average cost of the deck is in this video. We went over 8 decks, and I'm about to show you. The next screen that we have in this section is the average cost of these decks. I'm very curious. If you're hanging out in stream, A, hit the like button. B, if you're not, hit the subscribe. C, let me know right now in the chat. If you're watching the after video, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think the average cost of one of these decks is. Because quite frankly, when I was talking to Scott about it, I was actually shocked that it was the number that it is. Were you at all shocked, Scott?
I was shocked. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll give it a few more seconds here. Now we're gonna see it in a second. The obvious most expensive deck was the 70 card deck, right? Like
that's a little unfair advantage.
A little bit of it. You got 10 more cards, so obviously you're more expensive. What deck do you think was the cheapest though, Scott? If you didn't look at it,
I'd have to go back and think. Maybe the winner, I would think.
No, it was not actually.
Okay.
That was actually either average or above average.
So, all the emeralds had Kuzco, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to. I don't know.
So the cheapest deck by a very large margin.
Oh, right, because it doesn't have
And I'm talking like a large margin, like well below the average. So if you're looking for a budget deck, here is your budget deck right here. I already told you it was a lot of fun to play. I already told you it's really interesting. This deck currently would cost you less than $200 to build.
And with the changes we suggested, I think it's even cheaper, right?
It might even be cheaper. 100%. Yeah. Might even be cheaper. So like this deck is probably closer to like $150 deck right now. And
$40 of that is uncommons alone.
Yeah, for sure. But regardless, I thought it was the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
All right, so we got some good guesses here. So we got 500, 500, 450, 400, 420, 475. You guys are in the right. You guys are in the right range, right? You're in the right range. So this number did shock me. The average cost
thing you made. I love it.
What?
I love this thing you made.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the average cost is $453 for the top 8 decks. The two ruby amethysts were above $600. The highest was $613.66 for 70 cards. And the lowest was $175.89. Now I did this morning actually, so these prices are probably still fair in all honesty. But yeah, this I thought was the most interesting. $450. I'm sorry, if you're a competitive player in a competitive card game, that's not expensive. It's just, it's just not expensive to me. Like if you're willing to travel to events, if you're willing to, stay nights in a hotel and things like that, then you have to be willing to spend money to compete in the best manner. And if you're telling me that some of the best decks in the game, like the winning deck costs $430. So I'm sorry, 400.
Yeah.
Was it 451? 451? Is that what that was? That number there? No, I had to stretch the images to make this work well. Yeah. But that's the winning deck, it's to me, I think it's a very, very fair price. I don't think it's as dramatic or as drastic as people were saying at all.
So I guess this says that Amethyst cards are expensive.
The Amethyst legendaries are expensive.
Right.
For sure. It also is definitely saying that steel cards are expensive.
They went up as a result of the event. They were cheaper before.
Right. Definitely went up. I mean, like, we're going to talk about a couple of them in a second here, but yeah. All in all, I think it's great. I'm actually really, really happy with this current cost of a deck to play at an event. You know, I think, and this is market value. Obviously, if you can get below price, if you can get, like, you should be looking on. There's people on Facebook that are selling stuff at Facebook or like 75% of TCG low and things like that. Like, those are the things that I would be looking to buy if you're trying to get into one of these. But it is very interesting to me that the Amethyst Emerald deck was legitimately almost $300 below the average.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, all in all, if you enjoyed that section and you haven't already, please hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're not. Now, that was a bit of a marathon, Scott. You need a breath real quick? Are you all right? Because we still got a whole other section here.
I'm good. All right. You're only taking me away from more work, so it's all good.
I'm only taking you away from more work, but we're having fun, right? We're having fun. Yep. We have 50 people right now currently in chat. Seriously, shout out to you guys on a Saturday afternoon hanging out with us. As we said the other day, you know, we had to reschedule this because unfortunately I had a loss in the family. Definitely shout out to anyone that reached out to me. You guys were awesome. It was very, very nice of you. And yeah, tough week. We got together. But now we're gonna have some fun with finance. And Scott, I know how much you love finance.
Scott loves finance.
Scott loves finance. So most shocking prices in Lorcana, and I think it's just this week or maybe just an overall of like the first 3 weeks here. But let's be honest. Like, I think, what do we have? What was the number here, Scott? We have 8.
Yeah, 8 cards.
All right. So we have 8 cards to talk about here and their prices. And Scott picked all of them, even though I agree with pretty much all of them anyway. But our first one to start with is A Whole New World. So talk to me about A Whole New World, Scott.
So I think a big theme of this is that the decks we talked about in the past just now have a huge influence on the prices that you're going to see. The other thing that's interesting about the 8 cards we chose is the foil versions of a lot of these cards have gone up in higher percentages than even the regular cards. So if you are looking to trick out your deck with foil versions, you're going to be paying a premium for these specific cards because they are very popular. The one thing to point out here is a lot of the low prices for a lot of these cards were when the game launched at LGSs. So on, right around August 18th or even pre-sales. Some of them immediately went up after pre-sales, and some of them, went up later in the game. So as you see here, the peak for A Whole New World was after the event, so it was after last weekend. The other thing that happened overall in the market, as predicted, was when the big box release, in between the LGS and the big box release, there was an overall giant increase in prices of cards. The thing that also happened was after the big box release, as we talked about in the very beginning, prices went up again because it was not as expected. Prices have gone down a little bit since then because even though the big box releases have not been steady, it does not mean that it was non-existent. So even though you have a smaller percentage of players in getting product, a lot of the players that are getting product, some of them are resellers. So the overall price is coming down as those, some of those people just aren't players and they're trying to make back that money. So A Whole New World. The other thing to point out is there aren't a lot of super rares that are that great. So of the 12, I'd have to count it out, but I don't even think it's half.
18? It's 18, right?
18, sorry, yeah. So I don't even know that you can say there's 9 really good super rares.
Now, just because I want to make this real quick, can you also say that we can say the same for legendaries, right? Like half of them?
Yeah, probably.
So like half of them are like above $25 and the other half are like below 15?
Yeah, below 20, I would say, yeah.
That's below 20? Okay. Yeah. So half are above 30, half are below 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But the thing with super rares is that you get more of them in a box than we expected in the very beginning.
You get like 12 of them on average.
Yeah. and some of them aren't very good.
Sure.
So in order to try to make up the money that you open in certain packs, they're just going for more money. So when they are playable, they just tend to go for more. Right. So this card's had a huge swing. You were able to get it for like $11, $12 in the beginning during LGS release, and right this second it's sitting above $18. That's like the current. All these are market prices, by the way, not lows. So it's sitting above like $18.50, $18.66, and the highest that it went again was earlier this week or late last week after the big box quote release, and it had gone over $20 right after the events. Right after the event.
Is the green line the foil line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, you see a huge premium on foils for these cards.
Yeah, so you're talking right now it's like a $40 foil.
Close to that, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in that. I'm just saying, hard numbers here. We can't see the actual number there.
Yeah.
So the current price for the normal, like the non-foil version here is $18.66. That's market, right?
That's market, yeah.
Market. So $18.66, and then you're looking at the foil cost, which is nearly $40. That's actually over double, of what this card's current cost is. And I think that's a really interesting thing because in a lot of other games, that's just not true. Double for a foil seems ridiculous in most cases, but in this game, for some reason, it almost feels warranted.
Agreed. It's really pretty as a foil too.
Yeah, it helps. It helps. All right, so our next card is Ariel, Spectacular Singer, and would we say that the winning deck is, like an unbelievable key factor for this one?
Yes.
I mean, this card was what? $3, right? You can see the number. It was $3.64 before the 25th, right? So the day that it peaks is the 27th, it looks like, which is the day after PPG, right? PPG was 826, I think. Oh no, it wasn't. Yeah. PPG was 9.3. So this actually started to peak before PPG.
It starts to go up because basically supply of cards in general is just
sure.
So I think what you have here is because it was a super rare, because it's a known character, some people just started buying it up in general earlier on, but then after PPG is when it starts to really peak and hits its high price is actually right now market wise.
Yeah.
So it's currently going for its highest price right now, market value wise.
Interesting.
And you're hard pressed to find them at anywhere in the 12s right now.
Now, do you think that this is a card that has potential to continue to rise?
In the long run, I think it's a potential that has. So, okay, if we assume that cards overall are going to rise in price after things settle down right now, so after a lot of these sellers get rid of the product they have right now, and big box stores don't get refreshed, if LGSs don't get as much as they're supposed to get, depending on when they get it in October, etc. Yes. But I do the main thing I believe for this card is it has the ability to hold its value longer, because it's only going to go up as more songs get printed, and songs are going to be evergreen, even if they're. I would imagine I don't even know how many songs are in the set, like 10 or something like that, 10 to 12. So I would imagine that that's probably consistent considering how important Disney songs are. So whereas you might not see as many of other keywords, I do think you're going to continue to see a lot of songs. So I think her value is more evergreen than other cards.
Yeah, you'll see moving forward. You'll see more songs. You'll see more singer abilities, etc. But, her ability right now, she's the best singer in the game,
right?
Like bar down. So I don't know how the only way that changes is if somehow the songs that are made that are cheaper than her are warranted in some way, but to me, she's always gonna be really good. I think the next closest thing that even compete would be a 4, or I guess it'd have to be a 5 cost by most determinations, but a 5 cost that can sing the 7. But even right now, that's only singing Be Prepared. But that card would be, a really, really good card.
Or a 1 cost that can sing 3s.
Yeah, 1 cost that could sing 3 would definitely break barriers, huge barriers. All right, so our next card, this is our first anomaly, right? Because I don't even think you can explain this one to me.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it went down. I can see. Thank God. Talk to me about the Who's It Collector here.
So at some point this week, Ariel Who's It Collector was going for over $10, and I didn't understand why. I think it was speculation. I think it was just people buying Ariel because it's a cool art. Maybe they got the Ariels confused. I don't know. honestly. But at some point I looked down and Ariel, who's a collector, was going for over $10, and I didn't understand why. Again, that was a general, like you can see like the
I think it was on Wednesday morning specifically. So it was 3 days ago where I was in the middle of the stream and I remember I opened one. I was like, oh, hey, Scott, look, here's $10.
Right.
I mean, we didn't even see a Sapphire deck in the top 8 that we just covered. B, even if there was a Sapphire deck in the top 8, I don't think this card would have been in it. So like, this is just a weird jump. Was there just like not a lot of them? Like, is that have anything to do with it?
It was over. Yeah. It again last week after the big box quote launch debacle, I think people just had a ton of FOMO for getting any cards, and because this is the same rarity of a lot of those other cards, a lot of people just jumped on like, I can pay a little bit more to get this deck, even though it doesn't have results, versus I can pay a lot more to get this other deck that has a bunch of rares in it that are going for like a ton of money.
Fair.
So I think it's a rising tide raises all ships with Ariel, no pun intended. But at her rarity, she falls into a tier of like fringe playable, and I think people just like, if I need to build a deck in general for under $100, I can play her. So it just, her price just rises in general.
Interesting. So while being a budget deck, we create a position where we're no longer a budget deck.
Yeah, that's what happens a lot of times. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right. So be prepared. I can't believe this card was ever $7 is my first point. The high point, I thought it was higher than this, but I guess I was just wrong.
It's market, not like what it's actually selling.
Oh, okay. I mean, okay. So the market high point.
I will tell you, I've sold a foil for over $90.
Right. So yeah, I mean that's number one. Number two, I think that we were selling these at like $23 and we couldn't keep them in stock. So maybe we're a tribute to the market price being $17.38. I'm not sure; it's not certain, but this is a card that's it's dropped. What all right? So we're talking about it went up $12, $11, and then it dropped now another $5 or $6. Why do you think? What do you think in the drop is here?
I think the people that want to play Ruby Amethyst have their decks done.
Okay,
that's part of it. I think. I don't think people have cracked a code on playing it in a different deck. I think it possibly could see play in different decks. So its universal use is you're still only building one deck with it that most people think.
Right.
And I think Ruby Amethyst just isn't the flavor of the week like it was a week ago. So I think that's the concept. And it is a rare.
Right.
Again, I know it doesn't seem like there's more product out there, but there technically is more product out there, and there is more product out there for people that are selling cards. Right. So,
and there's more people selling cards.
There's more people selling cards, so it's a race to the bottom for them. If you look on TCG Player, you'll see a lot of people with very low number of sales affecting the price. And honestly, when people go to a store and are able to buy cards, they're buying every single card they can find.
Right.
So if they are a reseller, they are restocking themselves higher than a regular person off the street. So it just causes that race to the bottom to happen more often among just sellers, not necessarily among all players.
Right.
So because it is a rare and people are sometimes buying multiple boxes worth of product at a time and opening it, you're just getting more of them. So those same people that probably aren't players, probably aren't Lorcana players, you look at the names on there, they don't have like, Lorcana based names or anything like that. You don't know who they are. I don't recognize their names. They're just like, well, I have 3 of this card because I bought 4 boxes. I was able to get like 4 boxes of product at my 3 targets that I went to. So I'll just put it at the low, and it just causes the market to drop. But I think
because no matter which way we look at it, if you can get a pack for, I said this at the beginning of the stream, if you can get a pack, you have to pay $350 for a box. I promise you can still make money on that box.
Right.
Which is insane to say, but it's like all of the supply and demand effects to all of this is just creating this unbelievable number that weeks ago I would have been like, man, 250 is unbelievable. And now I'm going, man, 350 is like maybe I would do that. Like if if we were in a position where we were like out of stock of everything, it's like, well, we can probably still be okay with paying $350 a box, and that's just like it's just like the hard truth. That
Yeah.
and I don't have one on this this stream, but it's like they're selling on TCG Player for like $380 still, and we're talking like 5 or 6 or 7 boxes a day that are selling for $380 on TCG Player. So people are buying them. All right, first legendary. This is another one that's pretty big. Now, I guess to preface this real quick, Scott, though, do you think to start, when we learned that legendaries were actually like more than 2 a box, and there was this gigantic influx of cards released at Gen Con and at the beginning of the release weekend, and like, do you think that there's a chance that legendaries were just underpriced?
The ones, sort of. It had to do with the fact that people also thought that Enchanted you could actually get 1 per case,
Yeah, that's very
and
fair.
and that they weren't going to be worth infinite. So at that point, again, you were like, well, I can get an Elsa or I can get an Enchanted Elsa. And there were seemingly so many of them being open that affected her price in the beginning, where she was quote undervalued. But once like we actually had any kind of results or any kind of decks being made, yes, I think she was undervalued in the beginning.
Not even her. I just meant like in general, like legendaries in general.
Yes. I mean, because again, if you do the math, okay, so let's just say it's 5 per box on average, right?
Sure.
So 5 per box, there are 12 of them. So there's 60. So, okay, so if you need 4 of each, that's 48. And you're opening 5 per box. So even with absolute best distribution, you're talking about the average player needs 10 boxes. Let me tell you how few players can actually buy 10 boxes of product nowadays.
It's like impossible for, from what looks of it, like 99% of the player base.
Right. So if you want to build a master set for each card from scratch, only buying sealed product, it's impossible for 95 to 99% of players right now. So at that point, legendaries are undervalued because that's what you're going to need to finish those master sets if you are able to buy other product. Right. I think what has happened, though, is people are like, I can't get basically anything, so I'm just going to build my deck straight from singles, and that's what drives the price down.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Interesting. So let's talk about Elsa then.
So at LGS release, she's low at $32, basically on par with a lot of the other playable legendaries. And then again, all legendaries go up. Rising tide raises all ships. And that continues to happen. She is still prominent in every top 8 that you can find, dominating like one of the highest played cards in there, especially from the higher rarities. Owning more of her, having more of her in your deck is going to make your deck better. So she's like arguably one of the top 5 cards in the game. So what you wind up happening is after the big events and after the week goes on with the big box release, she just goes way up. She's over. I mean, at certain points, I saw her almost equal to Rapunzel, where she was basically almost $70 a lot of the times.
Okay.
But then she's just a casualty again of what's happening this weekend specifically, whereas certain stores had more product, so there's just more of her out there. So it's just more of a supply issue than it is a demand issue. So I would expect her to maintain her like value in the mid 50s. And if you could find any that are under 50, I would say it's probably a good deal right now. The one thing that's interesting to me is the spread between her normal and her foil, because there is an enchanted version. But what I will say is the enchanted version going for over $1,000 this week means that if you want to trick out your deck a little bit, it's best to just buy the foil version if you like that art. The other thing I've heard is that the enchanteds don't shuffle that well in terms of
really? Okay.
They're damaged more easily, I've heard. Like it's not that they're damaged more easily. I will say if you're going to play with them in general, they're not going to be like 10 grade after you play with them ever.
Oh yeah.
Of course. No. But I guess it's easier to scuff them because they're full art in certain spots. So if you're going to play with them, like they basically just wind up going from near mint to lightly played faster than a foil does. If that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah, somebody told me that, so I'll believe them.
Grab your swords. So this is the first card in here that I believe is a starter deck card.
Right, which is why it starts out really low.
Right.
So it starts out low because they were like, if I buy the starter, I'm gonna get. Well, guess what? People aren't able to buy the starters. So what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that spread between foil and normal is because it's in the starter.
Right, right.
So then you have basically the PPG Denver event, and just being a very powerful card in general raises the price to its high, and it pretty much stays up there. I mean, I sold these for double digits. Again, market price does not represent what you can actually get it for, just an average of what it has been sold during that like I think like the last 7 days or something like that. So it definitely has risen, and the foil spread is massive on this card because there aren't as many of them out there. It's just as rare as getting any other foil rare. So yes, you may have them if you're able to get your starters. And of course, big box stores did get a collection of starters.
Right.
The other thing I've noticed a lot is, and I mean, it is what it is, but like if you're not a reseller, I've seen a lot of players out there on Facebook groups selling the contents of the starter still wrapped up and just keeping a pack for normally almost as much as you're buying the starter for at MSRP, but that's neither here nor there. So if you buy that, I don't even know what's wrapped in that little
mesh or whatever
paper. I don't even know what it is.
It's like parchment paper.
Yeah. So if you're buying that starter cheaper than retail, a lot of times like $15 to $20 or whatever, you're getting a grab your sword in there.
Right.
So I mean, is it worth it to buy a starter deck? Yes, it still is worth it to buy a starter deck, but there's just more of them out there, and more of them out there for players that don't necessarily even want to. They don't really care about getting the pack and want to make the money back on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a whole other conversation, but it's just like, again, if you walk into Walmart, you're like, oh, I already have 3 starter decks. I don't need another starter deck. Well, if they don't have any other product and you want to open a pack, sadly, again, it's worth paying $17 to open a starter deck because, like, there's 3 cards in the deck that make you get your money back in theory, or what's like, quote, save you money even.
Yeah.
And then you get a booster pack.
Yeah. The main thing about you need to, and this is a much longer conversation, but
much longer.
Anytime you buy product that has like a set card, so like exactly what's in the starter, you're getting Grab Your Sword, Maleficent Uninvited. I don't even know what else, but like those are the two.
Even the area, the Aurora.
Yeah, the Aurora, things like that. Like when you know what you're getting, and the Simba and things like that. Like I'm getting these 5 rares or above or whatever. So and everybody's getting that. That just saves you from having to buy those cards later.
Right.
So like 2 Fire the Cannons, commons and uncommons that are playable, you're saving yourself from having to buy those again later.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that you can turn around and sell all these commons and uncommons and bulk rares.
You just look at it as it's like it's cost saved.
It's saving you money.
Right.
So if you're able to go out there and get if you can find 3 Sapphire steel starters, it's saving you from having to buy 3 Grab Your Swords, which is making up a lot of the money that you're spending on those starters.
Right, and you get 3 shots of booster pack.
So I mean, basically, a starter only costs $11 anyway when it starts at 17 because you're getting a booster pack. So,
right, interesting. All right, so Cusco, this guy's had a pretty wild journey.
Yeah. So again, LGS release just undervalues cards in general. Starts out as a high rare at the time of LGS release, but then rares in general just go up again, and then that's right at the 9-1 barrier. So right at where LGS release isn't really that exciting. He goes way up in value, but he's leveled off since then. Again, like there's a lot of FOMO around not being able to get cards in general on 9-1, and he goes way up. He was like $25 at one point. You couldn't find as a low.
Yeah.
But he comes back down to earth because I think the results just aren't there. So, like the results for some of the final results of some of the Emerald decks just aren't there. Right. And if Steel and Ruby are really powerful, it just hurts a lot of his value. So it just depends on what goes from there. But like again, in the end, he is a rare. So again, the people that are opening product want to make back the money on selling actual cards. He's a card that moves, so they lower his value and then he immediately moves. So it's like I'm immediately making back the money. I have to, they, God forbid, they wait 24 to 48 hours to make back the money on something. So some of the new sellers, so like they're like, okay, I'll just let them go. That drops the overall market price. But I would again, I imagine he maintains around this value. And if you can find them for under 15, it's probably a good deal.
Yeah, I think $15 for several of these cards is pretty fair. But then it also makes you look at, he's not a particular card, right? Like he's not like a card that's I'm only played in this one deck or in like this one archetype. Like he's just like, I'm just an Emerald good card.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when you look at Cusco and you can make an argument like, okay, this is going to remain a mainstay in Emerald for a long time. Whereas Be Prepared right now is the same rarity, but you're probably playing less of it more often and across multiple decks. So seeing that card stay below Cusco actually makes sense to me for the most point, unless it's like so very clear that this is the best deck in the game and you have to have 4 of them, and there just isn't enough to go around type argument. But I think
you also showed that the budget deck still played 4 Cuscos.
Yes, it was the most expensive card for sure in this budget deck.
So if you want to play a deck that's powerful, has results, and it's still under $200, you're willing to spend the money to get just the one card that's the most expensive. Yeah. So it keeps his value definitely in the double digits, and it may rise his price.
Like you're willing to spend $60 on your playset of Cuscos if the rest of your deck is going to cost $100.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, it's my favorite character in the game, Scott.
So
Tink, yeah. Well, just so let me start real quick. Tink is one of those cards that I think will always dramatically fluctuate in my humble opinion, because like there's gonna be weeks where Steel looks like the greatest thing ever, and then there's gonna be weeks where Steel looks like the worst thing ever.
I mean, I don't think she'll be under $30 ever again.
I don't think first of all, she shouldn't be under $30 again. Not will she? No, she shouldn't be under $30 again.
Right. So I don't think she'll ever be under $30 again. But I mean, again, you have LGS release. The dealers that were able to get a ton of product are sitting on a ton of super rares and want to make. It seemed like super rares were coming out of the woodwork when you were opening boxes. So you're like, oh, I have these like 10 Tinks. What am I going to do with them? I need to use them to make back money. Oh, if I can get $20 for a super rare, I'm good to go. Well, then again, not only is there product issues, but there's also results with her, where she's massively represented in the PPG top 8, as we went over, in the winner's deck, in multiple top 8 decks.
I mean, she was
on stream a lot, like seeing the power of her a lot. If people watch the coverage, so she winds up going like above $35 all the way up to like almost $37, and then again, it's just an issue of there being more product out there, so she comes back down to earth a little bit. But I think her $31 to $36 price tag is probably pretty fair, is where she'll wind up. $35.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can see the graph here, but like it was criminal that people were selling the foil Tinks for under $30. Like I literally, I'm not kidding. I literally told Scott, I'm like, I will keep every foil Tink that we own before selling that card at $30. Like there's no way.
Again, there's an enchanted version also.
There is an enchanted version, but I don't know. I don't know what the market price on that is. Did you put an enchanted market on it? We should have put the Elsa market on here. How come you didn't say that one on here, Scott?
Because they're not all, when you look at the card, they're not all like together. Enchanted have their own section.
That's very, very fair.
Yeah.
So that was a couple cards that were very interesting, and just honestly, just understanding the market, understanding the differences through the first 3 weeks of the game. Because from here on out, right, we can have like a real conversation. From here on out, there's no certainty really whatsoever of what we're gonna get, right? I mean, like we know that there's cards coming in October, 2 LGSs, but we have no idea what the number really is. So far, the early market for the big box stores are all over the place. There's no like real the only accurate reports is what they get, but even then it's been different. Like every time you hear something, it's like, oh, well, this one got this stash, and then this one got that stash. So it's like, what if if you're a buyer, right? Like if you're a buyer, you haven't been able to find product. Do you think right now would be the more ideal time to buy those singles?
Yeah, we're recording this on the 9th of September. You should be buying singles this weekend.
Yeah. I think a lot of it, specifically like Sunday, Monday, there was a huge rise in prices, specifically from the better cards, but also, as like Scott was saying, in this rush of concept of, well, my Walmart didn't get 10 boxes.
Yep.
And when I got to 17 different Walmarts, I didn't find any packs.
Yep.
What do I do? And that was a huge cause of things going up. Now, granted, I don't even know that this is true, but like a fair amount of player base that was playing events early on already all have their cards. Now, there's one or two things that I think could happen, right? Like one, maybe those players start selling the cards back, right? Because if they don't have another event to play in for a couple weeks, whatever, just get my money, sell it back, right? Or there'll be less people trying to buy the cards. So therefore, like maybe now we can meet a demand.
I still think the demand for this game is way greater than the supply.
Right. So at the end of the day,
it will be until whenever that quarter one restock is.
Right. So at the end of the day, when the prices are low, you should buy singles.
Right now, there are more sellers. I wouldn't say there's more sellers than buyers, but there are a lot of. If you think you can trust a seller with a low number of sales and a low rating, and you can, I mean, TCG Player will protect you if you don't get your cards. So if you think you can take advantage of a seller that's out there that's charging too little compared to market, you should be buying.
Right. Fair enough. So all in all,
unless you want to buy from us.
Right. So the pitch obviously here is that we do have a store. We actually restocked this morning before we went live. If you're looking for a trusted seller, obviously you can find it here with us. And all in all, Scott, we covered only 8 cards here. There are more than this. We didn't even talk about the Enchanteds and how they have been drastic. I think maybe we'll have a sequel to the Enchanted effect from a couple weeks ago where, in all honesty, I think that the prices for some of them have kind of skyrocketed. Elsa is the standout, but others are also standing above $500 now, which I wasn't really anticipating that early on. In all honesty, I looked at it like now that we're really hearing the numbers and understanding that even in a world where there are 1 in 96 packs, even if that's true, it's definitely not 1 in a case. So like, if your number is like, oh, I'm just going to buy my case, gets my 96 packs. Well, I can tell you that that's just bullshit. Again, it's not true. You should not rely on that number whatsoever. And honestly, you should feel fortunate if you opened an Enchanted in your case, because plenty of people open 0.
Yep. Agreed.
But yeah, I think that those are the real interesting ones. I think the foil itself, really understanding some of the foil costs and some of these things has really, really been interesting. And if you really want to geek out and be nerdy about those things, then hit us in the comments, let them know, and we'll definitely get that information out to you guys. This has been a really long stream, the longest for just you and I ever, for sure. We covered, 2 radically different topics for sure, but it was a lot of fun. The chat was awesome today. I think we, at one point we had over 50 viewers. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. We are going to get out of here. I'm going to go have a late lunch, and we'll catch you guys next week.
See you. Thanks.
See you guys.